The rain tapped gently against the tin roof of the hospital that night, as if the sky itself were whispering a secret it dared not speak too loudly. In the dim corridor, the faint cry of a newborn cut through the silence, fragile yet demanding, like a candle flame trembling in the dark. Amina stood there, her hands pressed against her chest, her heart aching with a longing that years of waiting had carved deep inside her. She had prayed, pleaded, and wept for a child of her own, but life had given her only empty cradles and sleepless nights filled with sorrow. That night, fate intervened in a way that would change everything. A young woman, her face pale with fear and shame, slipped quietly into the ward. She carried a bundle in her arms, her tears soaking the cloth that wrapped the baby. "Forgive me," she whispered, though no one was there to hear except the silent nurse who watched from behind a curtain. She laid the infant gently in a cot, kissed her forehead, and vanished into the shadows. Moments later, Amina was summoned by that very nurse, whose voice trembled as though she too bore the weight of guilt. "This child has no one," she said softly, avoiding Amina's eyes. Amina approached the cot, her breath catching when she saw the tiny face scrunched in distress. The baby's fists curled tightly, her dark eyes opening just enough to meet Amina's gaze, and in that instant, something unexplainable passed between them. It was as if the universe had written a bond in ink older than time. Without hesitation, Amina reached out, lifting the child against her chest, her arms forming a shield the baby had never known before. She pressed her cheek to the infant's hair and whispered, "You are mine. From this day you are mine." The nurse hesitated, her eyes darting to the incomplete stack of papers at the desk. Protocols were skipped, signatures left unfinished, but no one stopped Amina as she carried the baby out of the ward. Outside, the rain had slowed, the air heavy with the scent of earth washed clean. Amina walked home cradling the child, her heart bursting with both fear and joy. She named the baby Layla, meaning night, for it was under the veil of night that destiny had finally answered her prayer. Amina's life transformed overnight, not in ease but in responsibility. The quiet solitude of her days was replaced with cries at dawn, sleepless nights, and endless chores. She worked long hours in the fields, her hands raw from tilling soil and carrying baskets, yet she returned home with enough strength to cradle Layla, to sing her lullabies no matter how weary her bones felt. Every coin she earned was spent on milk, clothes, and little comforts for the child. Sometimes she went without food herself, placing the last piece of bread in Layla's tiny hands, her own stomach tightening in hunger. The villagers whispered when she walked by, their eyes sharp with suspicion. "That child is not hers," they murmured. Some said Amina had stolen the baby. Others insisted no good would come from raising a child without proper blessings. But Amina ignored their cruelty. Each time she looked into Layla's eyes, she saw not judgment, but innocence and trust. She would endure every rumor, every insult, if it meant her daughter grew up loved. Still, shadows lingered. The nurse who had handed her Layla sometimes appeared at the edge of Amina's thoughts, her hesitant glance, her silence, the way her hands trembled over unfinished documents. On stormy nights, when the wind howled against her windows, Amina would wake suddenly, clutching Layla close, haunted by the fear that someone would come to take her away. Yet each morning when the sun spilled over their small home, she found strength again. The bond between mother and daughter grew deep and unshakable. Layla's giggles became the melody of Amina's world. The child's first steps across the uneven floor brought tears to her eyes. Their lives were not easy, but in each sacrifice Amina made, she found joy reflected in Layla's smile. Though the path ahead was uncertain, Amina knew one truth with unwavering certainty: she was this child's mother in every way that mattered. The years rolled forward, and with them the rhythm of Amina and Layla's world took root. The small house echoed with warmth, the walls painted with laughter and the sense of simple meals cooking on the hearth. On Layla's 5th birthday, Amina scraped together enough money to buy a tiny cake frosted with sugar, its single candle glowing brighter in her heart than 100 lanterns. Layla clapped her hands in delight, her little voice filling the air with songs she made up as she went along. At school, Layla's curiosity blossomed. She carried books bigger than her arms, running home each day to tell Amina about letters, numbers, and stories of faraway lands. Amina listened with awe, her pride swelling with every new word Layla spoke. She kept every drawing Layla made, pinning them carefully to the wall as if they were precious jewels. The house that once felt hollow now brimmed with purpose, and Amina cherished every moment, aware that she was living a dream she once thought impossible. Yet beneath the joy, a quiet unease lurked. Whenever she held Layla's small hands in hers, she noticed how the child's features grew sharper, her eyes different from Amina's own. The villagers' whispers sometimes found their way to Amina's ears. She doesn't look like her. Though she smiled outwardly, inside her chest a knot tightened. At night, when Layla slept soundly, Amina would stand by the window and watch the moon, her thoughts restless. What if someone came one day claiming the child as theirs? What if the truth, hidden in those unsigned papers and silent whispers, surfaced at last? Still, she chose to silence those doubts. Every morning when Layla's laughter greeted her, when the child's arms wrapped tightly around her neck, Amina reminded herself that love was stronger than blood. The world might hold its secrets, but within the walls of their small home, the truth was simple and unwavering. They were mother and daughter, bound by something greater than fate. The years that once seemed to stretch endlessly between Amina and her daughter now rushed forward like a river in flood. Layla was no longer the child who clung to her skirts or begged for bedtime stories. She was a teenager now, her steps quick and restless, her questions sharper than any blade. Her beauty had begun to draw eyes in the marketplace. Long hair, confident posture, a spark in her gaze that seemed to outshine everyone around her. But with that beauty came whispers, and with whispers came doubt. At school her classmates teased her, though not always with cruelty. "How come you don't look like your mother?" one boy asked, his voice half mocking, half curious. Another chimed in, "Your skin is lighter. Your nose is different. Maybe you're adopted." The laughter that followed stung her ears long after the children had scattered. Layla walked home alone that day, her books pressed tightly to her chest, her eyes fixed on the dusty road. That evening, as she sat with Amina by the fire, she dared to ask, "Mama, why do people say I don't look like you?" Amina's hands froze mid-stitch, the needle trembling between her fingers. For a moment too long she said nothing, then forced a smile. "Children say many things they don't understand, Layla. You are mine, and that is all that matters." But her voice lacked its usual warmth, and Layla felt the distance between them stretch wider. The cracks began to appear slowly. Layla grew more independent, spending hours outside with friends or wandering by the river. She questioned traditions, questioned her place, questioned everything Amina said. "Why can't I stay out late? Why don't we have a father in this house? Why do you never talk about when I was a baby?" Each question pierced Amina's heart, but she answered with silence or deflection, afraid of the truth lurking in the shadows. At night, Layla lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words of her classmates. Doubt gnawed at her, and in her chest grew a longing she could not name, a longing for roots, for history, for something more than the fragile answers Amina offered. Amina, meanwhile, watched her daughter slip further away, her heart aching with fear, knowing that love alone might not be enough to keep the truth buried forever. The stranger arrived without announcement, as strangers often do, slipping into the rhythm of the village like a shadow that didn't belong. Zara was her name, though no one spoke it at first. She was a woman of striking presence, her eyes sharp and searching, her steps slow as though she measured the ground beneath her. She stood often at the edge of the marketplace, pretending to browse fabrics or fruit, but her gaze followed Layla wherever she went. Layla noticed her first. At the well, when she bent to fill her jug, she caught sight of the woman watching from across the square. At school, when she laughed with friends, the same eyes lingered at a distance. Even when she returned home, she sometimes found small notes slipped under the door, written in careful, unfamiliar handwriting, "You are more than you know," or, "The truth will find you soon." Confused and unsettled, Layla showed one of the notes to Amina. The moment Amina's eyes scanned the words, her face drained of color. She tore the paper to shreds, tossing it into the fire before Layla could protest. "Do not speak of this again," she said firmly, her tone colder than Layla had ever heard. But that night, Amina sat awake by the window, her body tense, her eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. The next day she followed her instincts and found Zara in the market. The woman's presence confirmed every fear that had haunted her since that night in the hospital. Zara's eyes held recognition, hunger, and something dangerous. When Amina approached, Zara only smiled, a smile both tender and unsettling. "She looks so much like me, doesn't she?" she murmured. Amina's chest tightened, her protective instincts flaring like fire. From that moment, Amina kept Layla close, her watchful eyes tracking every movement. But Layla, oblivious to the storm gathering around her, only felt her mother's grip tighten, her freedom shrink, and her curiosity deepen. The stranger had planted seeds of questions that no silence could smother, and Amina knew the time she feared was drawing near. The tension in their home grew heavier with each passing day, filling the air like smoke in a closed room. Layla, no longer a little girl willing to accept half answers, pressed harder. "Mama, tell me the truth. Who am I? Where did I come from? Her voice shook with frustration, her eyes searching for honesty. Amina tried to deflect, tried to soothe with gentle words. "You are my daughter, Layla. That is the only truth that matters." But her voice cracked, betraying her fear. Layla saw it. She saw the flicker of guilt, the way her mother's hands trembled, the way her eyes darted away instead of meeting hers. "Why won't you just tell me?" Layla cried one night, her fists clenched at her sides. "Do you even love me, or was I just someone else's child you pitted?" The words sliced through Amina like a blade, but she couldn't answer, not without tearing open the secret that had haunted her for years. The arguments grew more frequent. Doors slammed. Tears flowed. Amina found herself staring at the walls of their once warm home, wondering when it had turned into a battleground. She wanted to reach out to hold her daughter as she once had, but Layla recoiled, pushing her away. The girl who once clung to her skirts now walked with a defiant stride, her eyes burning with betrayal. At night, Amina wept silently, her hands clasped in prayer, begging for strength, for guidance, for a miracle that might keep the truth hidden a little longer. But each morning Layla's questions returned, sharper than before, and Amina's silence became an answer of its own. The bond they had built with so much sacrifice now hung by a thread, and both of them felt it fraying. The day of reckoning came without warning. Zara stepped boldly into Amina's yard, her voice cutting through the afternoon air. "That girl is mine." The words froze Amina where she stood, her body trembling as though the earth itself had shifted beneath her feet. Layla emerged from the house, confusion etched across her face. Zara's eyes softened as she looked at Layla. "I am your mother," she said, her voice trembling but certain. A gasp escaped Layla's lips as her gaze darted between the two women, searching for truth. Amina's world tilted. Memories crashed over her, of that night in the hospital, of the papers left unsigned, of the nurse's whisper. She had buried it all beneath years of love, but here it stood before her, undeniable. Zara continued, her voice heavy with pain. She told of being young, frightened, abandoned by her family, forced to give up her baby girl. Her words painted pictures of desperation and regret, of a choice she had never stopped mourning. Amina tried to protest, to claim her years of sacrifice, her sleepless nights, her endless love. But Zara produced papers, proof that had been hidden, and later even a DNA test that erased all doubt. The truth was no longer a shadow, it was a blazing light that burned everything Amina had built. Layla's face twisted with shock, anger, and heartbreak. "Is it true?" she demanded of Amina. Her voice broke on the last word, and Amina, unable to lie any longer, lowered her head in silence. That silence was louder than any confession. The world Amina had carefully woven, the identity she had given her daughter, unraveled in a single moment. And in the silence that followed, the sound of a heart breaking was almost audible. The nights grew longer for Amina after the confrontation, each hour dragging like a lifetime. Sleep abandoned her, leaving her to sit in silence while the moon cast cold light across her small home. She watched Layla from afar, her daughter's face turned away even in sleep, and felt the chasm widen with every passing day. Fear clutched her chest with every breath, fear that Zara would come again, fear that her daughter would be taken from her arms, fear that the years of sacrifice would mean nothing. She whispered prayers into the darkness, but even those seemed to dissolve before reaching heaven. The village was not kind. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Women in the marketplace lowered their voices when she passed. She raised another woman's child. She stole her. All these years she lied. The words, though hushed, cut sharper than blades. Men shook their heads, children stared openly, and friends she once trusted avoided her door. Even the air seemed heavier, pressing down on her shoulders, reminding her with every step that the truth had been unearthed and she was now the villain in a story she had written with love. At night, Amina sat by the fire, speaking aloud to the silence, her voice breaking under the weight of her thoughts. Am I still her mother if I did not give birth to her? Am I nothing after all these years? Was every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every wound upon my soul for nothing? Her hands trembled as she held Layla's childhood drawings, the one she had pinned proudly to the wall. She remembered the first word Layla spoke, the first time she walked, the first time she called her mama. Those memories were hers and hers alone, yet they seemed to slip through her fingers like smoke. Her tears fell freely as she wrestled with the unanswerable. To the world, Zara had blood. But Amina had love, the kind that had bled her dry, that had built a home from nothing, that had given Layla everything she could. Yet, in her daughter's eyes, was she now just a liar, a thief of motherhood? The silence in the house grew louder, and in that silence, Amina felt herself unraveling. The truth, though revealed once, came again with sharper edges when Zara sought out Layla directly. She found her by the riverbank, where the girl often went to escape the suffocating air of home. Zara approached slowly, her face etched with both sorrow and longing. "Layla," she said softly, and the name trembled on her tongue like a prayer she had repeated for years. Layla turned, wary, but something in Zara's eyes rooted her in place. With a breath that seemed to tear itself from her chest, Zara began to tell her story. She spoke of her youth, of the desperation that had consumed her when she had been forced to leave her newborn behind. She painted a picture of a girl trapped by poverty and shame, a girl who had no choice but to abandon the one thing she loved most. Tears streamed down Zara's face as she confessed, "I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." The words landed like stones in Layla's heart. She stared at the woman before her, searching her face for traces of herself, of truth. And then her thoughts turned to Amina, the woman who had raised her, the woman she had trusted with every part of her being. The realization hit her like a storm. Mama lied to me. When she returned home, her voice shook with fury and grief. "You lied to me my whole life," she shouted, her eyes blazing. Amina's lips parted, but no words came. She reached out, her hands trembling, but Layla pulled back. "You told me nothing, hid everything. Do you know what that makes me feel? Like I don't even know who I am." Amina fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Forgive me, my child. I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to have a life without shame, without the pain of knowing you were abandoned. Every choice I made was for love." Her voice cracked, raw with desperation. But Layla's anger was a storm not easily stilled. She turned away, her heart torn, her trust shattered. Amina's sobs filled the room, but they could not bridge the gap. For the first time in her life, the bond that had seemed unbreakable felt fragile, brittle, and dangerously close to breaking forever. Layla's world tilted, caught between two women and two truths. On one side stood Zara, her blood, her history, her unanswered questions. On the other side stood Amina, her love, her sacrifices, her memories. She walked the village streets in silence, her thoughts heavy, her heart divided. At times she looked into the mirror, searching her own face for answers. Did her eyes resemble Zara's? Did her smile belong to Amina? Who was she truly? The villagers offered no peace. Some urged her to embrace her blood, to go with Zara. Others whispered that love, not blood, defined a mother. But none of their words quieted the storm inside her. Zara pressed gently, her voice soft yet insistent. "Come with me. Let me make up for the years I lost. I can give you everything you've been denied." She spoke with promises of a new life, of family waiting beyond the horizon. Layla listened, her heart yearning for answers, but hesitation clung to her. At home, Amina grew quieter, her spirit dimmed, as if she were preparing herself to lose the child she had built her world around. "I will not beg you to stay," she whispered one evening, though her tears betrayed her strength. "But remember, it was my arms that held you when you cried, my hands that fed you when I went hungry, my heart that has loved you every day of your life." Layla lay awake that night, her mind a battlefield. One voice urged her toward blood, toward Zara, toward the truth of her birth. Another voice pulled her toward love, toward Amina, toward the only mother she had ever known. She thought of Zara's tears, of Amina's sacrifices, of the years lost and the years lived. As dawn broke, she realized there was no simple answer, no choice that would heal without hurting. Identity, loyalty, and truth warred within her, and she knew that whichever path she chose, part of her heart would always remain with the other. The decision loomed before her like a mountain, unyielding, demanding, and inescapable. The morning of her decision arrived with a stillness that felt heavy, as though even the wind held its breath. Layla stood between the two women who had come to define her life, Zara with her trembling hope, Amina with her quiet despair. Both waited, their eyes fixed on her, their hearts beating in anxious rhythm. Layla's voice shook when she finally spoke. "I cannot deny the truth. You are my blood," she said to Zara, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But blood alone is not what raised me. It was love. It was sacrifice. It was the woman who gave everything she had even when it was not enough." Her gaze shifted to Amina and her words softened. "You are my mother." Zara's shoulders trembled, her tears flowing freely, but she nodded slowly, accepting what she could not change. "Then let me at least be a part of your life," she whispered, her voice breaking. Layla stepped forward, embracing her, the bond of blood acknowledged but not allowed to erase the years already lived. Then she turned to Amina, who stood frozen, unable to believe what she had heard. I choose you, Layla said simply, wrapping her arms around her mother. Amina crumbled into the embrace, her sobs muffled against her daughter's shoulder. It was not a perfect ending, but it was enough. A reconciliation woven with threads of pain, forgiveness, and unshakable love. Time passed, and though wounds healed slowly, life continued. The narrator's voice rose above the quiet scenes of their lives. Motherhood is not only blood, but sacrifice and love. It is the sleepless nights, the empty stomachs filled only so a child may eat, the years of devotion invisible to the world. A mother is not only the one who gives life, but the one who nurtures it. In the final scene, Layla walked ahead, her figure tall and confident, stepping into adulthood with both women in her story etched into her heart. Behind her, Amina stood silently at the doorway of their small home, her hands clasped together. Her eyes were damp with tears, but her lips curved into a fragile smile. Pride swelled within her chest even as her heart ached. She had feared losing everything, but in the end she realized she had not lost her daughter. She had gained her choice, her independence, her love. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, as Amina whispered to herself, "She is mine. No matter where she goes, she will always be mine." And with that, the story closed, leaving behind the truth that love, tested, wounded, but enduring, was stronger than any bloodline could ever be.